Okay, so we all want to, like, get our shit together, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, like, who needs another self-help pep talk?
Right.
Like, that's where Sarah Knight's book is kind of different.
Totally. It's like she gives you that shot of espresso. You need to actually, like, get things moving.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
It's, like, straight to the point.
Yeah, she doesn't beat around the bush. She's like, look, we all have those oh shit moments.
Right, those wake-up calls.
Exactly. And she actually starts with a really personal one of her own, like a full-on panic attack she had at her corporate job.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, it was a big turning point for her.
That's wild, though, because it's not like she was...
A hot mess.
Yeah, like, she was successful, she was driven, but...
But something wasn't working.
Clearly, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like that classic thing.
Busy but not fulfilled.
Yes, exactly. And that's what led her to, like, redefine winning for herself.
Exactly. And that's like the foundation of her whole philosophy. It's not about competing with anyone else.
Right.
It's about competing with your own potential.
So it's about figuring out what success means for you, not for, like, society or whatever.
Exactly.
Okay, but how do we actually apply that?
Right.
It's like, it sounds good in theory, but where do we even start?
Well, she uses this really clever analogy of your keys, your phone, and your wallet.
Okay.
Like, you probably don't leave home without those things, right?
No, totally guilty. Those are my essentials.
Right.
But what does that have to do with anything, like, profound?
Well, think about what each one represents. Your keys are like your strategy, how you're going to get where you need to go.
Okay.
Your phone is your focus. It's how you manage your time, how you connect with the world, and your wallet. That's commitment.
Yeah.
It's putting your money where your mouth is, making decisions, taking action.
Well, okay. I see where you're going with this.
Right.
So it's like, if I'm always scattered with my time, maybe I need to look at how I'm managing my phone, like setting boundaries and stuff.
Exactly. Like, are you constantly getting sucked into scrolling or checking messages?
Oh, yes. 100%.
Right. So it's about recognizing those tendencies in ourselves.
And then being more intentional about it,
Exactly.
which I guess is a big part of, like, or everything.
Right.
And speaking of tendencies, Knight talks about these different personality types. The Alvins, the Simons, and the Theodore.
Oh, yeah.
Can you, like, remind us who's who again?
Okay, so picture Alvin as that person who's all about appearances. Like, they seem totally on top of things. Bills are paid on time.
Yeah.
Always put together.
Right.
But underneath, they might be avoiding bigger life changes, like going after that dream job.
Oh my gosh, that's so me.
Right. We all know an Alvin.
Totally.
Oh.
Okay, so if Alvin's the master of disguise, then who's Simon?
Simon is all about that curated life. You know, color-coded spreadsheets, killer wardrobe.
Okay.
But they're driven by external validation more than internal fulfillment. Like that friend who says yes to absolutely everything, even if it leaves them totally drained.
Oh God, I know a few Simons for sure.
Right.
And what about Theodore? Is that the, like, blissfully unaware type?
You got it. Theodores are the kings and queens of procrastination. They might struggle with organization, time management, and tend to shy away from responsibility.
Okay, so not that those are bad things, but...
Right. But taken to an extreme, they can be a problem.
For sure. But the thing is, none of us are, like, just one of these types, right?
Exactly. It's more about recognizing those tendencies in ourselves. Like, we all have a little bit of Alvin, Simon, A.D. Theodore in us.
Yeah, totally. Like, I can definitely see parts of myself in all three of those.
Exactly. It's about self-awareness, not judgment.
Okay, so once you kind of figure out which tendencies are holding you back, then what?
That's where the real work begins.
Right, because then it's like, okay, how do I actually change?
Exactly.
And Knight does not shy away from the F-bomb when she talks about this.
Oh, no, she does not.
Like, she literally calls it making a fuck budget.
Which is kind of brilliant when you think about it.
It's very her.
It is.
But it's not just about, like, tidying up your house. Right?
No, it's bigger than that.
It's about being really honest about where you're spending your time, your energy, and, yeah, even your, like, fucks.
Exactly. Like, are you saying yes to things out of obligation, even if they leave you feeling totally drained?
Oh, my God, all the time.
Right. So it's about getting real about what actually matters and ditching the rest.
So less overcommitting and more intentional living.
Exactly.
I like that.
It's about taking control of your life one fuck it at a time.
See, I love that. It's like you're giving yourself permission to say no to the things that don't serve you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guessing that ties into her advice on time management,
100%.
which, let's be real, is something a lot of us struggle with.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, why is it so hard to manage your time?
Well, for one thing, Knight points out that people who struggle with time management often underestimate how long things actually take.
Oh, totally. I'm so bad at that.
Yeah, like you think, oh, this will just take me 5 minutes.
And then an hour later.
Exactly. So one of her tips is to break down your day into smaller, more manageable chunks.
So instead of saying, I'm going to clean the whole house, it's more like, I'm going to tackle the bathroom.
Exactly. You're much more likely to actually do it when it feels less daunting.
That's so true.
She also talks about creating a must-do list, prioritizing those tasks ruthlessly and tackling the most important ones first.
Okay, so it's like being realistic and strategic about it,
Exactly.
which makes sense.
Eh.
But then there are those distractions.
Yes. The distraction.
Knight has some hilarious things to say about distractions.
She does. Like, she compares them to Arya Stark from Game of Thrones.
Okay.
She's like, those distractions are always lurking, ready to sabotage your best-laid plans.
And she wants us to go full medial defense mode to combat them.
Pretty much. She calls it taking evasive action.
Okay, I like it.
Like, if Twitter is your weakness, shut it down, log out, make it disappear.
Ooh, that's good.
Right. And if you do find yourself getting distracted, she recommends a stop, drop, and roll technique.
Wait, like a fire drill for your brain?
Exactly. It's about catching yourself in the act and consciously redirecting your focus.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about strategy. We've talked about focus.
Right.
Now let's talk about commitment, specifically when it comes to finances.
Oh, yeah, the money stuff.
Because Knight gets real about money.
She does. She doesn't sugarcoat it.
No,
She's like, if you're constantly broke, you might be money's bitch.
Which is harsh, but kind of true.
Right. It definitely makes you stop and think.
It does.
But she also says that getting your finances in order isn't about being like a financial expert.
It's about being mindful.
Exactly. It's about being aware of your spending habits.
So it's not about like being perfect with your money. It's about being more conscious about it.
Exactly. And she talks about taming what she calls the gremlin in the sheets.
Okay, that's a hilarious visual.
It is, but it's that thing that makes you spend money without thinking.
Like impulse purchases.
Exactly. And the example she uses is cutting back on those daily $5 lattes.
Which, I mean, for some people, that's their thing.
Right.
But it's about finding where your gremlin is hiding.
Exactly. And those small, seemingly insignificant expenses that add up over time.
Yeah, and how those small changes, when you do them consistently, can actually make a big difference.
Exactly. It's not just about like being frugal or anything. It's
No.
about understanding like where your money's going and making sure it's actually going towards things that matter to you.
Yes, and not just like disappearing into the void.
Exactly. Now, on a totally different note, have you ever noticed how sometimes you need like an extra push to actually take action, even when you know what you need to do?
Oh, all the time.
Like, that's where I think Knight's take on negative thinking is actually really interesting.
Okay, so this is the part that really surprised me. Like, it feels so counterintuitive to everything you hear about like positive thinking and self-improvement.
Right.
So how does she make negative thinking work for you?
Well, it's about harnessing those negative emotions, like
Mhm.
that fear of missing out or the dread of a future consequence. And then you kind of use that as fuel to motivate positive change.
Okay, so like instead of saying I should really eat healthier, you'd say something like,
I really don't want to feel sluggish and gross after every meal.
oh, I see what you mean.
Right. It's about getting real with yourself about the consequences of not changing.
So instead of vaguely being like, I want to exercise more, I could try, I don't want to be out of breath walking up the stairs.
Exactly. It's like you're creating a stronger sense of urgency and purpose.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see how that would be more motivating.
Right. It's about tapping into that immediate discomfort rather than just relying on willpower.
That's brilliant. It's like reverse psychology for your goals.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about money. We've talked about motivation.
Right.
Now let's get into relationships. Because Knight doesn't just focus on romantic relationships.
No, she talks about all kinds of relationships, right?
She does, friends, family, coworkers. Because those relationships are a huge part of our lives.
For sure. And she has this really interesting way of categorizing them.
Oh, yeah. She breaks them down into 3 categories. Relationships that need maintaining, relationships that could use some improvement, and those that might need dissolving.
Okay, the dreaded D word.
I know, right? But sometimes it's the healthiest option.
Totally. Like sometimes hitting the eject button is necessary, even if it's hard.
Exactly. It's about being honest with yourself about which relationships are actually adding value to your life.
And which ones are just draining your energy.
Exactly. So for those relationships that we do want to keep strong,
Right.
she talks a lot about the importance of being present.
Which sounds simple enough.
It does, but it's so easy to just like get caught up in our phones and everything.
Oh my God, yes.
Right. So she's really emphasizing the importance of like putting your phone away when you're with someone, actually listening instead of just waiting for your turn to talk.
It's about being present in the moment,
Yeah.
really showing up for the people who matter.
Exactly. And she has some really practical tips for staying connected even when life gets busy.
Okay, like what?
Well, one of my favorites is her one-line email strategy.
The one-line email. Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's literally just a quick email letting someone know you're thinking of them.
Okay, so it could be like a funny meme or
Exactly. Or just a quick, hope you're having a great week.
it's about making that small effort.
Exactly. Because those small gestures can actually make a big difference in maintaining those connections.
That's such good advice.
Mm.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, but we haven't even touched on what Knight calls the deep shit.
Right. Like the heavier stuff?
Yes, things like anxiety, fear of failure, perfectionism.
Exactly. And I think what's really powerful about this part of the book is that Knight doesn't shy away from sharing her own experiences.
She gets really personal,
She does. Like, she talks about her own struggles with an eating disorder.
which is really brave of her.
It is. And what's so compelling is how she connects her experience to this idea of getting your shit together.
It's not about being perfect. It's about taking things one step at a time.
Exactly. And that even when we stumble, which we all do,
Yeah.
we can always choose to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and keep going.
I love it. Okay, so speaking of perfection, Knight has that whole 12-step program for defeating perfectionism.
Oh, yeah, the 12 steps.
It's pretty great.
It is. And she starts with a really important first step, admitting that you're powerless over perfectionism.
Wait, so like step one is acceptance.
Exactly. It's recognizing that it's often a defense mechanism, a way to protect ourselves from failure and judgment.
So it's about being aware of it and understanding that it's not actually serving us.
Exactly. And the rest of the steps kind of build from there, like letting go of unrealistic expectations, focusing on what you can control, embracing the beauty of good enough.
She's all about lowering that bar.
Right.
Like not aiming for perfect, but aiming for done.
Precisely. Because perfectionism can be paralyzing.
Totally. It keeps us from taking risks.
Exactly. And ultimately, it keeps us from achieving our goals.
It's like that fear of failure, that voice that says, it's not good enough yet, or what if people don't like it?
Which leads to procrastination, avoidance, all that fun stuff.
Yes. So how do we break free from that trap?
Well, one of her suggestions is to reframe our thinking. Like, instead of striving for flawless, we should strive for progress.
So celebrating those small wins, even if they're not perfect.
Exactly. Remembering that done is always better than perfect.
So good. Okay, so we've talked about recognizing those self-sabotaging tendencies in ourselves.
Yeah.
And Knight has this really interesting exercise that can help with that.
You're talking about her who raised you exercise.
Yes, I love that one.
It's so simple, but so insightful.
Tell us more about it.
Okay, so she says, think about those annoying habits or behaviors that we often criticize in other people.
Like those little things that drive us crazy.
Exactly. And then ask yourself, am I guilty of this too?
It's like holding up a mirror to your own behavior.
Exactly. Because often the things that annoy us most in others are the things we're also struggling with ourselves.
It's about being honest with yourself.
Exactly. And then taking responsibility for your own actions.
Okay, so we've talked about the deep shit. Now what about the other side? Like what happens when we've actually made those big life changes?
Right. When you're actually living that get your shit together life.
Yes. And Knight has some great stories about this part too.
Oh, she does. Like, remember that summer she spent hopping between sublets?
Yes. Her in-laws' house. Either her childhood bedroom.
All while trying to finish writing Get Your Shit Together.
It's like something out of a movie.
I know. But what's fascinating is that she still managed to stay focused on her goal.
She's all about prioritizing.
Right.
Like sticking to that writing schedule no matter what.
Exactly. She practiced what she preached.
She really did.
Yeah.
And she manages to find humor in those challenging moments.
Oh, totally. Like that whole description of the mildew-infested Airbnb.
Oh my gosh, yes. The fruit flies, the noisy ceiling fans.
The surprise millipede.
It's like a sitcom.
I know, right? But it's also a good reminder that even when you're trying to get your shit together, life is still going to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Life doesn't just stop throwing curveballs.
Nope. So it's about being flexible and adaptable.
And knowing when to just roll with it.
Exactly. Speaking of rolling with it, Remember Knight's Gist bingo challenge? Yeah, the bingo card. It's like her fun little way to make this whole self-improvement thing a little less daunting.
Okay, so how does it work? It's like a bingo card, but instead of numbers, it's filled with like tasks or goals.
You got it. So each square represents a specific action. Things like take one step toward a goal, exert willpower, do something brave, say no to something you don't want to do, and you check off the squares as you accomplish them.
So it's about celebrating those small victories, those everyday wins.
Exactly. And the goal is to try to get at least one bingo, 5 squares in a row by the end of the month.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
It's a fun way to stay motivated and track your progress.
Exactly. And it kind of reminds you that getting your shit together doesn't have to be this big, overwhelming thing.
Right. It's about those small, consistent efforts that add up over time.
Exactly. And she doesn't just leave us with a bingo card and a pat on the back. She leaves us with a final thought-provoking question.
Okay, I'm ready for it. What's the question?
So her question is, what small manageable chunk will you tackle today to move closer to your version of winning at life?
Ooh, I like that. It's like bringing you back to that idea of taking ownership, focusing on what you can control.
Exactly. And it reminds us that we get to decide what winning even means for us.
Right. Like there's no right or wrong answer.
Exactly. Whether it's finally tackling that thing you've been putting off or setting a boundary in a relationship or even just taking 5 minutes for yourself to breathe, those small actions can make a big difference.
It's about building momentum.
Right.
Like one small win can lead to another and another.
Totally. And I think that's what I love about Knight's book.
What's that?
It gives you permission to just start.
Yes. Like stop overthinking it. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Just start taking action.
Exactly. And be kind to yourself along the way.
Yes. Because that's important. Like it's not about being perfect at this whole get your shit together thing.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's about figuring out what works for you.
100%. So to our listener, as you're navigating all the ups and downs of life,
Because there will be ups and downs.
oh, there will be. But remember that you have the power to make positive changes.
One step at a time.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to embrace the mess. Celebrate the small wins. And be kind to yourself along the way.
Because it's your journey.
It's your game.
Your rules. Go forth and get your shit together.